Hey y'all, Zelda here. I am here to do a reading roundup for the month of April 2026. Um, I feel like I read some good ones this month. I read a total of 19 books this month, including audiobooks, paper books, digital books, all types of books. So, like graphic novels, fiction, nonfiction, different genres. And I'm going to go through all of them with you. I don't have like the books all here, but I do have a notebook. I did this month start keeping this notebook that I got on sale. And I have my little like notes on the books that I read. This has been really fun. I've for a really long time wanted to keep track of the books that I read and like write little reviews. But I don't know, I have some like demand avoidance around things that I like build up as like habits or things that are tasks that I feel like I have to do that are like maintenance, and they tend to make things that I love less fun. And so I try not to put too much of those on reading, which is like right now I'm doing these reading roundups, but I'm not holding myself to the like having to do them forever. I'm not holding myself to having to write them down forever, but I have over the past couple of years been logging all of the books I read in Storygraph, and I don't know whether it's like I'm private or I don't want like I don't want to like have to pull together my thoughts in a comment that other people could read or what. I don't know what it is, but I never feel like writing a comment there, at least in the moment. I do always put a star, or at least now, like the past year or so, I've put a star rating just because I want to remember whether I like it or not. And also because I really appreciate that other people put their stuff in. So I feel kind of bad. Like I wish that I did want to, because I like that people contribute so I can go look and I use that as a resource. So I'd love to like be part of the, the resource and supporting what I find to be so useful. But as I've kind of gone along this month, especially, I just found that I did have some things that I wanted to jot down, partly because of making these videos, but also partly because I've just been reading a couple of books that are more stimulating. And I found myself wishing that I remembered more of a comment, like a book from that someone like talked about, and I was like, oh, I wish that I know I had a feeling and I wish I wrote it down right after I read it. Because those things like kind of fade away a little bit as you continue taking new things. And I mean, part of the beauty of getting to reread books, which I am avid lover of rereading books, especially books that I love. But sometimes, as you'll see, I think I reread one that I didn't like. And I didn't know that because I, at that point, didn't even remember that I had read it. I'd read it when I had Kindle Unlimited, and I don't do any Amazon things, so I don't have Kindle Unlimited. I actually don't have any unlimited subscriptions besides the library, which is the ultimate free unlimited subscription, but I don't pay for any subscription book services. So I did read it then, and I just honestly forgot, and it was on sale, so I got it as like an audiobook and listened to it. I'll talk more about it later, but because of that, I'm like, oh, I kind of wish that I'd written down that I didn't really like that when I read it, because I probably wouldn't have spent my time rereading it. But yeah. Let's see. Is there anything else I want to mention before we start? No. I'm just really into my new notebook. I tend to get obsessed with new notebooks. It's like a little traveler notebook, so I can refill it, which I've also really wanted to bond with a traveler notebook and haven't. Okay. Well, let's get into it, since there's quite a few books for us to talk about, 19 of them. As always, you can let me know if this is just like too many books in this format. I am still like, one of these days I will timestamp it so that you can go and hear what I think about a particular book. But lately I've just been posting videos. I don't know how to edit yet. So, maybe in a couple years, like when I look back at my old videos, I have a different setup. My camera's not as good. There are things that have improved and other things that I thought I was going to learn by now and haven't. So maybe in a couple years, I'll look back and be like, oh, I can't believe I didn't edit anything, but we learn as we go. Okay. So number one, This was called Sea Poison by Karen Balin. I gave this book 2.75 stars. I wrote below that, I don't know, literally it might have deserved more, but I didn't like it. So that's just me, right? Like one thing I would love is that I would love to know if y'all have a specific way that you do ratings. Like, do you give it stars for certain things? Like I've talked about in previous videos, I would say every book starts at about a 3. I'm happy that people are writing books. I think all sorts of books deserve to exist. If it's good and I'm like, I'm happy I read it, that's like a 3 book for me. If it generally loses or gains things from there, right? Like if I want to recommend it right away after I read it, no matter to who, usually it's about a 4. If I'm going to reread it, it's usually at least a 4. Sometimes it's a little lower than that, and I just have an issue with it, even though I would reread it. But a lot of times books like under 3, those are not usually reread books for me. They're usually very like specific. I have like specific qualms with them. This one was a very interesting book. I got this from the library. I do love picking up like usually 1 or 2 books from the library that are more literary, that are something that I wouldn't read maybe ordinarily. This one was Olympian, which Olipo, if you don't know, I'm going to botch the, it's been a long time since I did my degree in writing. The Olympians are like a school of writers who were based on creating writing constraints to kind of like open up the writing process, like to do like experiments. Like there is a book called Avoid that is written without the use of E, and that is an Olympian book. So this is like a movement of writers that, I know I studied in school and that do some very interesting things, but are very like conceptual. And for me, a lot of times, at least in my experience of it, because it is an experiment, it's almost like the experiment eventually like reveals something about the process. And because of that, it is very conceptual and less foregrounded of the story itself, because it's almost like it exposes the inner workings of it. Some people are super into that. I know that I went to school with people who really, really loved Olympian writing, who were that style of writers. It's just, I'm really big. I would say like for me, number one thing in a story is like the characters and the organic like revelation of the story. That's just like my personal preference, and also like how I engage with my writing process too. Like they happen to align. And so that's what I prefer. And I feel like it is less organic in that way because it is so like almost like overworked. Having said that, it was interesting. It was because of the Olympian, I found it a little bit tedious. I said like, to me, in a way that these experiments can kind of be, it was constrained, propelled by an external form rather than an internal one. I will say that medical abuse and medical rape are addressed in depth in this. Sometimes the absurdity of the tone does feel like it matched the like violence of medical trauma or the experience of the body. So much like dissonance in the book. There were points that I found really interesting. Sea Poison is like there's a grocery store called Sea and Poison, and it's referring to this this book that is, funnily enough, was a book that my spouse was reading like not too long ago. But it is like a very violent book. And so I don't know, it just kind of like chafed at me after a while. It's not something that I loved. It was interesting. I'm happy to have read it. I definitely wouldn't read it again. And I probably would give it away if I had it because I wouldn't re-engage it. But it was interesting. I said it was super short and hard to finish for me. Okay, the next book is Tarot for the Hard Work, an archetypal journey to confront racism and inspire collective healing by Maria Minnis. I gave this 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed how it moved through. So it's a book that is goes through all of the cards of the major arcana in tarot. It talks about the card through the lens of social justice, and then it gives, roles in a social justice movement, like revolutionary roles that could go along with each archetype, as well as further resources to engage with social justice work that aligns with that, questions for reflection, as well as ways in which you can continue to, show up in social justice work in alignment with that archetype. Now, I really love this idea. I loved how it was written. I think a lot of it was beautiful. I think one other reviewer that I saw comment on it spoke to I guess I was figuring out why is it not perfect 5-star, since I did really like it. And while I thought it was really interesting, there were some of the interpretations of the cards that I didn't always fully connect with. I also, it was very sequential. It kind of stuck to the form really intently. I would have loved to see something about the minor arcana in terms of speaking about the elements and that kind of thing. But overall, I thought it was a really great resource. I definitely will keep it as a reference book. I will revisit it. I do work that kind of centers how people are, finding their work in social justice. I like thinking about the work that I do that connects with the liberatory work that I want to see happening in the world and that I want to engage and participate in on all levels. And I love thinking about how the archetypes of tarot align with that. So I thought this was really good overall, and would definitely recommend it if these are topics that you're interested in. The next book is The Witch Stone. I gave this was by Henry H. Neff. I gave this 4 stars. I really liked the narrator, who is named Ramiz Monsef. Did really great voices for all of the different characters. I often I listen to a lot of fantasy, romantasy, romance, and I tend to love a dual narrator, but I really loved this one. He was amazing. I would definitely listen to something else that this person narrated. As my spouse called it, my spouse also listened to this one before I did and said it was a romp. And I absolutely agree. It was a romp. It was super lovable characters, quest style adventure, very satisfying conclusion. I will say the one thing that I had that was a critical comment is that it did take me quite a while to feel immersed in this book. I feel like it was halfway through the book before I was oh, okay, I'm on board. It just was a long opening for some reason, but I don't know that everyone would feel that way. Maybe it was just the time I was listening to it or what I had going on. I don't know what the circumstances were, but I felt there was maybe the character tension or something at a certain point. I was oh, I want to see what happens. And that didn't happen for a while. I was kind of take it or leave it for a while. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. If you like a quest, going to collect items and doing something and accomplishing something specific, and it's not romantic in that way, if you like that kind of thing, I think you would really enjoy it. The next book I read was a manga book. It is called They Were 11! By Moto Hagio. I gave it 3.75 stars. This was a really big one. It was both a big book and pretty thick, which I love, a long manga book that is very immersive. It was very interesting. The premise at the beginning was kind of Star Trek-y type of future sci-fi story where it's set in this training academy and they're starting a test and there's supposed to be 10 of the trainees, but there's actually 11. And so it starts in this kind of who's the 11th person, which is hence the title. This is at the very beginning, the very opener of the book. So it's not a spoiler. But the first part of the book kind of follows, I'm going to tell you I guess a tiny spoiler. If you don't want to know anything about it, maybe you skip through this part, but I'm not going to tell you what happens, but just it's broken into different sections. So part of it is set in that test and it kind of goes through that and you have that discovery and experience. And then part of it is set at the academy, and then part of it is set at the king, who's one of the people's planet, and an uprising that's happening there. And so it was almost different arcs of the story, which for me at least, I feel like it had that quality that manga can sometimes have in longer series where it like loses some momentum and like you have to really like the characters. And I liked it well enough. I gave it 3.75 stars. I found the art style and the like story development of the world to be pretty interesting. I don't know that I would read it again. I would definitely recommend it if you like Star Trek and you like manga. I feel like this is a really good sci-fi overlap. And it was also nice that it was contained, right? Like it's a contained book. A lot of manga is like a series and you have to decide how invested you are. And if you're going to buy them, they're kind of expensive, you know, that kind of thing. But yeah, it was really well contained and I liked the art style a lot. And there were little bits of color like I think it was monocolor of pink or purple. I can't remember exactly what color it was, but those were really beautiful too. So it was a really beautiful book. I liked it. The next one is another these three actually in a row were some that I got from the library, and they were all graphic novels or manga. The next one is a graphic novel called The Confessional by Paige Hender. I gave this one 4 stars. This one was great. It was a like vampire graphic novel that was like a period piece in a Jack the Ripper type of protagonist, antagonist, and a vampire. And there just was a lot of tension and overlay of like sin and like religious, you know, assumptions and self-hate. And I feel like the vampire like trope lends itself really well to like digging into that. And I really liked the art. The art was this very, I'm trying to remember what the style, like maybe it was like Caroline the Strange or something like that. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but there was this like cartoon and it's got this like kind of big head and like tiny neck and then like a bigger body, almost like Coraline, I guess. There's just this like very like gothic, you know, interesting art style that like for me just really drew me in. I really enjoyed just like looking at it. I enjoyed it. I don't own it, but if you like vampires and you like that kind of thing, I think it was a really fun, quick read and a very satisfying overall story to me. Self-contained. Okay, the next one was called Holy Lacrimony by Michael DeForge. I gave it 3.75 stars. The premise of this is a big part of why I gave it so many stars, to be honest. I thought it was a really interesting, hilarious premise. And I feel like that container did really carry me through this book. I did find it memorable, honestly. It was a fun experience. You know, it's kind of like watching like a weird short film at like a film festival. It's just like a fun art immersive experience reading some of these odd graphic novels. Even if they're not like my favorite thing or the style I would always read, I just find it really stimulating and interesting and thought-provoking. So the premise of Holy Lacrimony is that a man is abducted by aliens to be studied because he is the saddest person on earth. And they want to study his emotions. So it was super strange. I feel like the art style was very like abstract and emotional. And essentially he like went through the like sadness process. There was this really amazing part where he was like, surely my life isn't the worst. And they're like, oh no, your life is not the worst and you are the saddest. So this is super weird. You know, like it was just like super interesting. I will say there were so many moments after the initial alien abduction, so to speak, or the studying process. So another spoiler, I guess, is that I'm going to talk again about like the arc of the book a little without telling you exactly certain things. But after the abduction or after the like that studying moment, there's like him coming back to Earth. And there's this like premise of like an alien abduction support group. And I feel like the abduction was maybe like the first half, and then the second half felt really lackluster to me, I suppose. After the strangeness of it, it felt very like, I don't know, like almost like a jolt to just like come back to Earth and be like, oh, it's just like a support group. But one of the things that I really, really loved conceptually that really stood out about this book is that he was less depressed. I guess this is kind of a spoiler, so spoiler alert, I guess. He was less depressed on coming back to Earth because he sometimes would think of himself as being studied and would need to, like, as if he was being observed or studied and witnessed, and would need to like take care of himself almost. And I thought, as a therapist, as someone who like thinks about these things a lot, I thought it was a really interesting model of like almost a depersonalization of our emotions in a like healthy way, where we kind of can sometimes mechanically go through the process of caring for ourselves in like a near clinical way, not like long term, but in a way that can almost be loving or self-caring, like thinking of ourselves as like, how would someone else care for us? What does something bigger, connecting to spiritual meaning, or, those types of things. So I really liked that like concept of the process. And sometimes I think the concept was more inspiring to me than like the work as a whole. I do find that sometimes with graphic novels, sometimes with films too. I'm like, did I like it, or did I like being that it was thought provoking? And I don't know that I really need to like separate out those from each other. So yeah, so I gave that one 3.5 stars. Okay, the next one is a romance. It is Yin Yang Love Song by Lauren Kung Jessen. I gave this one 3.5 stars. I loved the overall kind of, I don't know that I loved the premise, but I really liked the characters. In terms of the main character was like a traditional Chinese medicine acupuncturist who worked with all of the women in this family are named after flowers. So her name is Chrissy, short for chrysanthemum, which is just really cute. I liked all of their flower names. I like flowers a lot. You've seen me talk about flower spirits if you've been here on my channel. Like, I just really liked that, and I like traditional Chinese medicine. I like acupuncture. So there was some sort of like my special interest overlapped and was like, ooh, that's super interesting, which kind of made sense that was like foregrounded, because at the end of the book, this is not a spoiler, it's just like the author afterward, and the author talked about how her experience was mirrored by one of the characters in some ways, because she went through this kind of like healing process of a specific type of burnout, and how traditional Chinese medicine and learning how to rest was such a process. And so I feel like it did kind of mirror like that, like she had some sort of, not like that one of the characters was her, but just like it made sense that the different types of the healing process were something that she'd experienced directly and hadn't just like done a little bit of like medium interest research into. Like, it was deeper than that. And so if you like that, and you like a character that like connects with another interest of yours, and that's an interest of yours, I feel like that was kind of cool. I will say that it's kind of like a fake dating situation. Chrissy feels like her family is cursed so that she can't find love. The guy is a famous musician and has this like heartbreaker thing, so he needs a fake relationship. So they do that. I think that the tension between them was so immediate that there wasn't this like crescendo of, tension buildup that I can find very appealing. But I think that they modeled really healthy communication. So I said like extra 0.5 star for that. There was not a miscommunication trope, really. I really liked that they talked things through and talked them out. So I did appreciate that. It wasn't like overwhelmingly amazing, but I did enjoy it. And I will say sometimes 3.5 stars is what I'm looking for in a romance. It was relaxing. I listened to it. I thought it was going to be like a sleepy, I don't like it that much, kind of listen to it before bed kind of book. But I actually ended up liking it so much that I did listen to it like the next day, which to me is like, it's moving from like a 3 to a 3.5 at least. Okay. The next one is called Truly, Madly, Deeply by L.J. Shen. I gave this one 3.25 stars. I said that there was some enjoyable tension as a second chance romance. I liked the characters. I find the love heals all trauma trope to be a little annoying. I don't know if that's like a technical trope, but I feel like in some of these like dark romances, there's this quality of like, I am so traumatized, but now that I'm loved, none of those other things come up. And I just feel like it's so, like, as someone who's experienced trauma, it's like so unrealistic. Even though I do think that like reparative relationship does have this healing effect, I like it when there's a little bit more of the like mess revealed, because I just find it like more validating and sexier because of that. You know, like I find that like to be an appeal of the process, not a downside. And so I find that it like flattens it a little bit, but I liked it. I liked the other I read this one because I really liked the other LJ Shen one, I think Bad Bishop. I'm really excited to read the second one of that. The plot of that one was just more exciting. I didn't find the plot of this one to be overly exciting. It was kind of a slow burn, but it was okay. Yeah. I kind of like LJ Shen's writing, so I'm kind of like interested to see what else they've written if I like other things. Sometimes I find, oh, I really like this book, I want to like read more of this author, and then I find, oh, I just liked that book. You know, I just liked that character. I didn't actually love that author that much, which is totally fine. Okay, the next book I really liked. I read these first two books of this series. The first is The Wolf King by Laura Paul Freeman. 4.25 stars for this one. It is very spicy. It was a slow burn, long build up to the culmination, very exciting plot. I will say it had this overlap of genres that I love that I like did not know that could go together. Someone described it as, what did they say? They said it was like Outlander and ACOTAR mashup, which I totally agree. That is totally the vibe of this, is like an Outlander ACOTAR mashup. So it's got like the Scottish Highlander accent with the audiobook narrator, and they're like wolf shifters. And so the male main character, at least one of the male main characters, has that like Highlander type of Scottish accent. One of the narrators is Zara Hampton Brown, which if you've read the like Olympian god, like Neon Gods type of series or listened to the series, she's the female narrator for the female characters. And I just think she's amazing. I would like listen to her read grocery lists. I just love her voice. So yeah, it definitely does have ACOTAR vibes. I like this. There's this trope of like kind of a kept woman coming into her own power, which is fun to watch. Someone kind of feisty. It felt exciting, well paced. It did end on a cliffhanger. Yeah, I liked it. At this point, I was like, ooh, okay. Fun. The second one, I did say it was too exciting to listen to before bed. There was some like betrayal. It did feel like there was like genuine betrayal and in the enemies to lovers trope, but I was really invested and engaged. The Night Prince by Lauren Paul Freeman is the second book. I said that I liked this one a little bit less. I gave it 4 stars. I was going to give it less stars than that because I had this like, am I going to like how it ends? And it's so frustrating because the third book isn't out and now I really want to listen to the third book. But I do feel like it was a classic second book in the sense that like it really dragged out what didn't feel like it needed to like take that long. Okay, am I going to give a spoiler? Okay, I am going to give a spoiler. I'm going to talk about a trope that I hate, which is going to, in a sense, necessitate that I talk about what happened in this book. So if you don't want a spoiler, I do recommend reading this. The third one is not out yet. It is coming out later this year. So please skip ahead if you don't want a spoiler on this book. But I'm just going to talk about what happened. I said that it was so dragged out that I felt super bad for Callum. I kind of felt like this happened in ACOTAR where it like really got dragged out. And then I just am like feeling like guilty for this person who's like just not accepting what happened. Also, I had this fear that it was going to be a rejected mate series because I kind of like saw the writing in the wall on that. I felt like it was kind of obvious about Blake. And I I hate rejected mate tropes. I like hate them. I just do not like them. I do not understand personally why, if you had someone who was like destined for you by the universe, that you would just be like, nah, even if something bad happened, just work it out. I don't know if that's like my divorced parents and wish for my parent trap life situation, or whether that's the fact that like I feel like working through conflict makes life better. I don't know what that is in my psyche, but I do not like a rejected mate trope. I hate it. And so I was a little worried that that was going to happen because of how much this female main character like resisted the situation that was like going on and the like obvious attraction. I will say it like did drag out kind of like the sexiness of it in some ways, but I just was like, I don't know, because it was dragged out almost too long. I started being like, oh, it's not like edging anymore. It's just like frustrating. And so I found like the stubbornness to become a little petulant almost, which is for me frustrating, because even though I do see that as like, it makes sense for like a character's growing edge, I think at a certain point it becomes almost like a plot obstacle, and you could do that with plot while the main character could continue to grow, which to me feels like either they're going to refuse the growth and grow in a different way, or they're going to meet that in some way and have some growth. So like that's just like a personal issue that I had, right? And I didn't like that. After this, though, I said, what did I say before that? I said, oh, I don't like the petulance, even if it has parallels in real life, like the end of a relationship we resist, even though it's clearly over. From the outside, even though this does feel validating for certain people's life experiences, there are certain things that are real life that I'm like, I don't need to see that in a book. That's like real life. I have to deal with that in therapy for folks. And like, why do that? I don't like it. So that's just like a pet peeve of mine, right? Like I didn't like it. I wanted there to be some like organic movement. It was just like frustration. But I will say, I still gave this book 4 stars, because sometimes there's hard part and you're like, yeah, I didn't like the book, but it like makes sense. And I loved the plot twist at the end of this book. I feel like a part of the world got revealed with like the lore that actually made a lot of sense for why there was so much resistance and why there was so much like tension and pushback. So it actually like put the earlier stuff in relationship a little bit. And now it did feel and does feel devastating that I have to wait until November for book 3. I would reread this, kind of like I did with the Fourth Wing series. I will re-listen to it. I love the accents, so I will re-listen to it when the 3rd book comes out to have like a fun new immersive experience. Yeah, the narrators really excelled. It was definitely the highlight. I love that they introduced a 3rd male narrator for Blake. It felt like a good idea. I loved the bond. I loved the dream sequences. Yeah, I did. I really liked it. There were some pet peeves, and like, was the writing always like the perfect pinnacle of good writing? No, but like, I liked it. So, end of spoiler time. We're going to move on to the next one. Okay. The next book was Our Vicious Oaths by N.E. Davenport. I gave this one 2.75 stars. I probably would have honestly rated this one lower if I didn't really like the premise and the fact that I like the representation. There is absolutely no reason that Faye cannot be melanated. And besides the fact that, you know, systemic racism and internalized like assumptions of like white as like a default state, I don't like that at all. I also do think that that's not necessarily true. I do think that there are often unseelie or different fae realms in certain books that are portrayed as melanated or not white at the very least. I don't know that fae is always like Anglo-Saxon type of white, but having said that, I totally agree, and I like that there would be some like representation. It almost is like, why is there not more representation of like African informed or like Afro-Caribbean even like spirituality, when that is such an abundant and beautiful like spiritual system. I just, you know, I don't understand that. So I really love the idea, right? I would love to read more books with like informed by Orisha, is informed by, like, I would love to read more of that. So I think that that is so cool, but I didn't love the way that this author did it. That's just like for me, right? Like maybe someone really loved it. I did see some reviewers who felt really seen by it. So I do think that representation is so, so important. And just because I didn't personally love something, and I'll tell you why, but, just because I didn't personally love something doesn't mean I'm not grateful that it exists in the world. I think that is so amazing that people do their different writing and that people tell their own stories and tell the story, like they write the stories they wanted to read. I think that is amazing, right? Personally, I feel like the thing I liked was the initial lore. The mating mark is kind of interesting. Like I tend to like that. I like a fated mates type of series, but there were just certain ways in which the culture was integrated, like the choices that were made that made it feel like it. The reason I comment on that is because it was obviously very intentional. Like there was an author's note about it. And there were things like grills being in like a sign of attractiveness, and that's fine. Like, I think that that is cool. I personally, it almost like reminds me of when people use like a brand name in a book or, describe something. It like jolts me out of the world building a little bit. Like I would almost prefer that they describe that and have it be like a fey metal covering of the teeth, like it has that same quality, and it invites that cultural representation in without saying it. It's like showing it instead of telling it type of thing. That's just my personal preference. So like that kind of like jolted me out of it, where I was like, yeah, it's okay. Like I really like that idea of doing that. I didn't love the way that it was done, I guess. I didn't see a reason that I said this is that it also made the Fae feel a little more human. I think that they were more like magic wielding immortals, which technically is Fae, but Fae always have this like weird non-human, almost like predatory type of energy that even in working with other realms, I just feel like is accurate. They're like not human, even if they are occasionally like humanoid. And so I almost feel like that was less present and it felt like different, which is okay. It can be different. There's nothing wrong with that. But that was an effect of it. I feel like the dragons, the Kangamatos being a part of the story was not really utilized. And I love dragons. If you've watched other videos, I work with dragons. So I'm just like sad that I didn't get to hear more about the Kangamatos. And I was like, she's a dragon rider, but like, I want to, what's going on? Tell me more. So it was really heavy on the smut element. And for me, it wasn't super sexy. It wasn't as like, I don't know. I feel like Katie Roberts is a really good example where the like dynamic of the sex usually furthers the character development. And I feel like in this, it was almost like an interlude. And because it was a single book series, it took up a lot of space where I kind of like wanted the plot to be plotting, because there was like feasibly kind of an interesting plot that could take place. And I felt like it was just a little disproportional. Like I said, I would have personally rated it a little lower if it didn't have these other things that were really working for it, because I didn't really enjoy a lot of it. But I did, there was a lot of potential. I just didn't feel like I said earlier in this video, I really want to feel connected to the characters, not even seeing myself represented, but like really invested in them. Or like emotionally attached to them in some way. And I just didn't in this particular book. The ending felt a little like flat and I didn't feel like super satisfied after. Okay, the next book, talk about going from, I wasn't super satisfied to, God of Malice by Rena Kent, which I do think, it's been a long time. I almost kind of want to reread them now. Like I said, this was the book that I said I read on Kindle Unlimited, and I thought I liked it more. But this was not good. I gave it 1.75 stars. I probably could have gone a little lower. It was definitely morally black. So sometimes there are like morally gray characters. And then if we're using that like moral spectrum, this was like morally not gray. This was morally dark, immoral, right? but I have less issue with that. I kind of do like the sociopath spectrum trope because I like neurodivergent tropes in general, and that really falls into that. It has very similar qualities. And I'll talk more about that at a different time, but the dialogue, the writing, the dirty talk was just kind of bad. I would really check out the trigger warnings before reading this. The reason that I gave it 1.75 stars at all was that I actually really liked the plot twist at the end. I was so surprised. Not like shocked surprised, but it was like interesting. But yeah, I was like, the genre of sociopath spectrum disorder, like those types of things, is really up my alley. Personally, like I'll talk about it in a different time. That is like my trauma incorporation. I just really like that. I like neurodivergent tropes. But it felt like there was a lot of potential, but it was really not good. I didn't like the writing. I didn't like the dirty talk. I thought, it opens with a very assaulty scene, which like within the context of a story, like I saw a lot of people who were like, this is really fucked up because of this reason, which I kind of agree. But I also think that it's within the world of the story. There are trigger warnings. Like it was explained. Some aspect of that was explained. And like, that's not like my only takeaway. I think like people are into stalker stuff. They're in all sorts of weird stuff, and that's fine. Sometimes it can even be sexy. But I don't think it was well done. Yeah. So I was disappointed. I think I liked the other God of Blank books, but maybe I was wrong. I'll let you know if I reread or re-listen to any of the other ones. I will if they're on sale in my Libro FM sale, because if they're a dollar or two, then I'll probably re-listen to them. Okay, the next one, I really liked this one. The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chokshi. The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chokshi. I gave this one 4.25 stars. It was ethereal. I loved the tapestry of fairy tales. I loved the ending. It was really romantic. The premise is that this scholar of myths is searching for fairy. He's trying to find out kind of what happened to his brother, and you get to like learn about his backstory. He goes to meet this person who says that they have a grimoire, and they end up getting married. And the premise is that this is all like at the very beginning. The premise is that he can't inquire into her background at all, like can't go digging for her secrets. And then, inevitably, family member gets sick, they go to the House of Dreams, which is her childhood home, and stuff starts happening. It is so magical. It kind of reminded me, I feel like if you like Mexican Gothic, you would like this book. I really liked Mexican Gothic. It had a similar vibe. It was a little less scary, in my opinion. It was just really like unraveled like a tapestry. I just thought it was very densely poetic. I kind of wish I understood more about the other world, but it was alluring. And the other thing that I wish that could have maybe bumped it up higher is that the ending did feel a little sudden still. But yeah, I liked it. I would reread it, honestly. I would probably reread it like a paper copy, just because I feel like it was so dense and unfurling that I wanted to marinate on some of the phrases and things like that. Okay, the next one is When a Scot Ties the Knot by Tessa Dare. Shout out to the Moonshadow from my Discord group that I am part of, Moonshadows, who recommended this book to me because it was such a sleeper hit. Based on the cover, it just looks like a classic bodice ripper, and maybe it is. Maybe I'm under valuing that, but it's a Regency type of book. And generally I am not a historical romance girly. I find them a little boring. I like there to be some magic, some action, the gossip and will they, won't they is not enough for me usually. I just find it a little tedious at times. But I gave this one 4 stars. It was just so surprising. So the premise of this is that this socially anxious woman dreams up this Scottish captain, of in the army, and she writes letters to him and says that they like met and they're betrothed, and like writes all these letters to this captain that doesn't exist, that she thinks doesn't exist, right? And she sends them off, and then she says he dies, and her family gives her this house so she doesn't have to like go out and like marry someone else, gives her this house in the Highlands and like this land. And then one day she's like an illustrator of like bugs, and then one day this guy shows up and is like, I'm the captain, I got your letters, and wants to marry her so that he can have her land for the men in his army who like their land got taken away. So he kind of like blackmails her into marrying him, and it's just super funny. Captain Mackenzie is roguish and handsome, and his backstory, they both are kind of interesting, and they have like a little bit of nuance in their backstories, but really the banter is so good. The banter is hilarious. The side characters were awesome. I loved the side characters, like these men who had been in the war but who were so like endearing. I also loved the lobster fact. She has these like lobsters that are that are getting ready to mate, and then like they're supposed to like make have sex for, you know, solidifying their marriage bond essentially. And she said that lobsters will wait until the female lobster feels safe enough to molt so that they can mate, and so that if lobsters can wait that long, that they should be able to wait too. And I don't know, there were just like so many endearing, cute qualities about this book that there was emotional growth. I liked it. I would really enjoyed it. I was like so like, wow. It was amazing to be reading. I was telling my spouse too, like reading it is like, it's just got a cover of a book that I would not pick up personally. And not because I don't think that they're good, just because I don't think they're like my type of book. I think there's nothing wrong with liking whatever type of book you like. But like I said, I just was so surprised. I also really liked the narrator. So when I first started listening to this book, it was so funny. If you have listened to Someone You Can Build a Nest In, it is the same narrator. So I was listening to it and I was like, oh my gosh, is this the narrator? Is this and like, it's so funny because in that book, it's like almost grotesque, but also romantic. And so it was so interesting to hear this narrator, Carmen Rose, do this story, do the accents. I was so swept up in it. Another narrator that I would just like listen to, read a laundry list. Just loved it. Okay. Yeah. The next book is The City in Glass by Nevo. I gave this book 4.5 stars. Nevo is just amazing. Deserves all the awards that they have gotten. I just love their writing. I think it's so amazing. At first, the pace felt kind of meandering, even though the writing was very beautiful and lush. A city that was loved and a city that was fallen. Like, essentially, it's like the demon Vitrine loves this city, and the angels come and destroy it. And she puts a part of herself into one of the angels. And so, like, this is kind of like the initial premise. I said in the end, it was not one love story, but many. And I didn't know until it had ensnared me how much I wished for the sweet embrace of redemption in this. How my soul at this moment needed to hear of something rising from the ashes more beautiful and aching than ever before. I really had that feeling. I read it and I had such like an emotional response and reaction to something rising out of the ashes. I think at this moment in our society, it was really beautiful to hear of something crumbling and like being lovingly rebuilt, like one stone at a time, and just the like enduring perseverance of humans and of the world. It was just really beautiful. And I loved the ending. I felt like I felt like something was happening in my heart, like a weed growing up through concrete, just like something breaking open in the most beautiful and perseverant and natural way possible. So yeah, I really adored it. I didn't give it 5 stars just because it took me a long time to grip onto it. I longed for a little more traction at the beginning, but overall, delightful. Wish I owned a copy of it, frankly, so I could lend it to people. But this was a library book, so they can lend it to people. So that's great. The next book I listened to is Rest is Resistance, a Manifesto by Trisha Hersey. This one I gave 5 stars. I said it was the Empress embodied. I listened to this over the course of a month. Trisha Hersey goes by the Nap Bishop, or she runs the Nap Ministry on different socials. Her voice, she read it. It was so amazing. I felt really inspired and reminded of the value of surrender and yield. Excuse me. It felt very poetic and practical. I also feel like the politics of refusal is so important at this moment in history, and I really loved both her explicit nod and acknowledgement to the politics of refusal, as well as her refusal to like commodify or oversimplify the process of rest. It really did feel like a true manifesto. I also really got like a resource that I'm really excited that I added to my TBR, which is Slavery's Exiles, which I'm really looking forward to reading. So I feel like it was a really educational resource. It also was just really moving and motivating of the value of rest and surrender. Yeah, I highly recommend it. Okay, the next book is Heart Song by S.E. Wendell, 2 stars. Kind of similar to one of the other ones. I gave this one a little bit more because of the representation. I generally love chronic illness representation, and this had like chronic migraine representation. I just found it especially disappointing because of it. I found the main character to be really annoying, honestly. Like, sometimes we just are like, wow, I would not want to be friends with you in real life, like I just found the main character to be pretty annoying. And the male character, I didn't find to be very dimensional. Like the premise is that essentially she like works in this art museum where there are all these statues of gargoyles and guardians is what they're called, but that's kind of how I was conceptualizing them, is like gargoyles and guardians. And one night there's a break-in and she touches a statue and the statue comes to life and says that he's her mate. And the premise is fine. Like that, I actually loved the premise. I thought I was really going to like the book. That's right up my alley. I love a fated mate series. I love like monster involvement, like I love, partly because that's like a fantasy. I just like that. So I was expecting to enjoy it, even if it wasn't like the pinnacle of fine literature. I liked the plot idea of it. Even there like was lore, but the actual problem with this book was that it was so boring. Like there was so much plot that could have been plotting, and like I feel like the first 70% or something of this book was just them like sitting in her apartment, or like her being like uncomfortable with the idea of mates, which like I get, like that makes so much sense to have difficulty with the idea of someone coming to life and being a fated mate, but like that's not an interesting story to me. That is not the most exciting part of that story. Like the more exciting part is like, what is all the other stuff? And I know that there's a second book, but I just don't trust that they aren't going to do that again in the second book. So I'm not open to reading it unless it is, like I said, if it's on sale. This one was on sale. Maybe if the second was on sale, I'd give it a shot because it was starting to pick up at the end and it was kind of like interesting, but I just like am not up for a sequel. I also didn't find the sex to be sexy enough. Also, like the main trope was like the gray sweatpants thing, which I'm just like, I don't know, maybe that's just like a super straight trope and I'm just like not into it as kind of a queer femme, but like, yeah, that doesn't do it for me. I didn't find that. I found that to be also like one of those things where it like takes you out of like the world, so to speak, and you're just like, oh, it's kind of weird. But yeah, some people might be super into that, but yeah, I just found it really like, oh my gosh, really? Okay, going to work, coming home, blah, blah, blah. Like I just, yeah. But once the plot started happening, I was like, oh, maybe, but then it was over, and I just couldn't justify getting into the second one quite yet, at the very least. Yeah. Okay. two more left. One is Honey and Spice by Bolu Babalola, 4 stars. This was so sweet. I loved the narrator. I also found this book because Bolu Babalola has a book of short stories called Love in Color that were beautiful. Talk about wanting like Orisha representation. It was just like so gorgeous. There was Yemoja and Oya and Shango, and there was just like so many. I just loved it. It was so yummy and so fun to see this person's like romantic spirit and just like celebrating romance and these types of different archetypes. I loved it. And this book, at first I was a little like, oh, like I think the pacing, I just was like, it's like taking a long time to pick up, but the banter really sold me. Kind of like the other book, like the relationship, there just was so much good chemistry. It was really good representation of both Black joy and Black struggles in institutional racism. Not that like I am an expert, but I just think that, that is something that is so important. So I loved seeing that. And I loved the like fantasy nerd vibe. I personally would normally prefer the fantasy book itself. Like I said, it just like it is just a little less maybe exciting in certain ways than I would have liked as far as the plot goes. But Kikiola and Malachi, I found myself just like smiling at their energy and their connection, and their backstories were beautiful. I also really like the quality of listening to audiobooks where there's that like they're a podcast host or something like that. And that was kind of what this was. It reminded me a little bit like First Time Caller by BK Borison in that way, where it felt like listening to it on audio made a lot of sense for the format because of that. So that added another level of like yumminess. I would listen to the second book of this series, although I don't really know, like I said, like I don't know how much more plot there was. I feel like them getting together was the plot. Not that I wasn't like happy for like the representation of what was going on in the book. It just like it wasn't as exciting. So once like that kind of was overcome, it felt very complete. So even though there's a second one, I don't feel like immediately propelled to getting it because it felt like there was a period at the end of the sentence and it was very like encompassed in itself. So yeah. The last book is another nonfiction. I didn't read a ton of nonfiction this month, not as many as I wanted, but that's what it is. It's called Healing Ancestral Family Patterns by Dr. Stephen Farmer. I gave it 3 stars. I gave it 3 stars despite the fact that I think that there were some problematic things with this book. And if there was not so much actual good information that I feel like is actually kind of hard to find on things like ancestral elevation, basically, he doesn't call it that, but that's what I feel like this is speaking to, is like ancestral elevation practices and ancestral veneration practices. If that was actually named and the cultures from which this comes were more honored, I think that I would have given this more stars, even though I didn't find the information in this book to be particularly new to me. I always am looking for resources that I can recommend and pass on to people and point towards when people are asking me questions, whether it's online or my clients or people in my life that I love, that kind of thing. I did think that there was very interesting information as far as speaking about the value of these like different parts of honoring ancestors. I did feel like it was an erasure of some of the legacy of this and didn't address colonialism. Like I just felt like it was neglectful, right? To the extent where like now as I'm saying this, maybe I should take more stars off, but I do feel like it was genuinely like some of the practices, like it went through different practices and some of them are really useful and were kind of interesting to me to see laid out in this fashion. So I felt very conflicted, and like not that this person should have necessarily gone super in depth, but I just feel like it is a disservice to not name that so much of this is directly due to the legacy of colonialization and violence and cultural appropriation, and that we cannot examine our lineages and engage in appropriate ancestral veneration without acknowledging the violence and trauma of the generations that have come before. That is part of the forgiving and the alleviating and the supporting and moving towards. their purpose in the hereafter. And so to me, that was just like a real disservice to not speak to that. But I will say that, some of the things that were addressed, I think it is cool to see them written down in book form, even though I don't know that this is the person who necessarily like should have been writing about it or is the primary resource I would want people to go to. But yes, okay. That was a lot. This is such a long video. This is the longest reading roundup I've ever done. I guess taking notes, I just had more to say on all of the different books. I hope that if you watch this, I can't believe it if you watch the whole thing. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for such a long time. I would love to hear what books you read this month. If there's any books that you would recommend to me, given the ones that I read and liked. Thank you so much for being here. Many blessings to you, and I'll see you next time. Bye.